Welcome to today's webinar, co-hosted by Illinois Extension and the Illinois Office of Broadband. We welcome Matt Schmidt, Deputy Director for Broadband within the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and Molly Hammond, Acting State Director of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Rural Development in Illinois. They'll be speaking about federal funding opportunities and how to collaborate and leverage current and expected opportunities to the fullest for broadband development in our communities. I'm going to give a brief bio of each of our presenters before handing it over to them today. Molly Hammond is currently serving here in Champaign in an interim capacity before another director is appointed to that role. She served as the Illinois Associate Director for USDA Rural Development, overseeing agency operations and managing administrative functions for rural development in the state. In a previous role at Rural Development, she worked with businesses and lending institutions throughout the state on financing new and expanded business ventures. She coordinated the agency's renewable energy and energy efficiency efforts in Illinois and has coordinated available programs with Illinois electric and telephone cooperatives. Prior to being with USDA Rural Development, she worked in commercial and mortgage banking. And she is a past chair of the board for Illinois Rural Partners, and she's a graduate of the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana with a Bachelor of Science in Finance. Matt Schmidt, whom many of you are now familiar with, is Deputy Director for Broadband within the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. He administers the state's Office of Broadband and with a variety of grant programs, including our nationally competitive Connect Illinois Infrastructure Grant Program. Prior to this role, Matt has engaged public policy from various perspectives, and he has worn many different hats as a state legislator, leading on issues such as infrastructure and economic competitiveness, as an academic researcher, a published author, a university instructor, and an independent consultant. He specializes in technology deployment, infrastructure investment, and economic development, with integration of 21st century infrastructure as a primary focus of his work. For decades, Matt has maintained active membership with the Transportation Research Board, which is a branch of the National Academy of Sciences. So we're very lucky to have Matt Schmidt and Molly Hammond working for us every day in Illinois and also joining us today on this webinar. And before I hand it over to Molly, I want to just encourage participants today to utilize the chat space to ask questions at any time during the presentation. And if you're having technical issues, please put those questions in there as well, or direct message those to myself. If you're having difficulties, we can work through those in the background. And when today's speakers are finished, we'll have a Q&A. We'll have a brief Q&A after Molly speaks as well. I'm going to send a follow-up email to everybody with the slides and the recording. If you know you didn't register for today's session, but you are just jumping on the call, you can certainly direct message me your email address, and I'll make sure that you receive the slides in a follow-up email as well. So I just want to say thank you again, Matt and Molly, for being here today to highlight these important opportunities. And Molly, I will hand it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and I really appreciate being with everyone today. Looking at the participants, I know several of you, so nice to see you virtually, and glad to be here to talk today about Rural Development's broadband programs. I also have Chris Collins on the line. He's USDA's General Field Representative for Telecommunications in Illinois. He's housed in Missouri, but he comes here frequently, and he is a great resource, and I'm thrilled that he's on the line. So if there are those technical questions, then Chris can definitely assist today. So many here with rural development, but just to go over what our mission, our core mission is, we're committed to helping improve the economy and quality of life in rural America. And we do that through loans, grants, and loan guarantees that support essential services. And the areas that we provide funding are for housing, for business, for economic development in so many ways, healthcare, first responder, any essential community facilities for rural communities, and then through water, electric, and telecommunications infrastructure. Within rural development, we have 3 agencies that deliver these programs. We have the Rural Utilities Service, which is where our broadband programs fall. And then we have the Rural Housing Service and the Rural Business Cooperative Service. Across those agencies, we deliver over 40 programs. We do administer the RUS electric and telecommunications programs from our national office. And so that's where Chris resides in Missouri, but works for our DC office. But we work very closely to make sure that the outreach is established throughout the state. We don't want people to not know about our programs, and Chris can't be everywhere at once in two states. So we try to do as much as possible on getting the word out about these programs. So RUS has a rich history where it started as the Rural Electrification Administration, REA, back in 1935, bringing rural electrification to rural America. In 1949, REA received authority to finance telephone service in rural communities. And our names have changed through the years, and it's all evolved, but we're still really doing that core financing these utilities in rural areas of the states. So in 1995, we became the Rural Utilities Service, and we've been that ever since. And since 2010, RUS has approved over $7 billion in loans and grants, and I have a feeling that's even more today. So we have quite a few programs in the rural broadband area, but I'm going to talk about each of them. These are kind of the main ones that you'll hear on True Broadband, which is our Telecommunications Infrastructure Loan Program, our Community Connect Grant Program, and our newest program established in 2018-2019, the Reconnect Program. So the Telecommunications Infrastructure Loan Program is really our original flagship loan program. Telephone cooperatives have been using this program for many, many years. It's well funded, and Illinois typically has loans each year. As you can see from the available funding for the past several years, it's been $690 million. These loans finance new and improved telecommunications infrastructure, primarily for the benefit of rural populations in communities of 5,000 or less. And there are some cases where we would serve non-rural subscribers. In 2020, there were 8 loans approved for $98.6 million. Illinois did have a successful loan application. I would say that's gone down a little bit based on the Reconnect program becoming so popular. Chris would be able to confirm that or not, but as you can see, the past couple of fiscal years, there had been more loans made across the nation. So the standard loan terms are a 2-year principal deferral. Interest rate is at the cost of money. And then the loan maturity is the life of the facility's finance plus 3 years. Our staff, like Chris and others, can assist and review loan applications before submission. And we do accept loan applications year-round in this program. The Rural Broadband Access Loan Grant, and Loan Guarantee Program is a Farm Bill program. It hasn't been quite as popular across the nation, really. As you can see, just a few loans approved. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. I guess the main difference that I would kind of point out is that it serves rural communities of 20,000 or less and not in an urbanized area. Like many of our programs, service area cannot be in an RUS previously funded area. Currently, we're not accepting applications pending an implementation of a new public notice system that was required by the 2018 Farm Bill. The Community Connect Grant Program, on the other hand, is definitely a popular program. We have, thankfully, in fiscal year 20, have received a Community Connect grant. Some years we have several applicants and they haven't been successful, but this program is, it's an important one for the areas that really have absolutely no broadband. So basically it's a grant fund for broadband deployment in eligible rural areas for populations of 20,000 or less. The amounts are vast, from $100,000 to $3 million. The service area must not have access to broadband service. And then we're looking at minimum service defined as 10.1 for the grant, 25.3. There is a 15% matching requirement. And then a change is that now these applications are accepted through a portal. And so on the next slide, I'll get into that a little bit. But this year, we had the cycle closed on December 23rd. We had 73 applications nationwide. Currently, they're in a public notice period where they reach out to the current providers to make sure there's no challenge to the application. And then we do expect decisions on this program in the second quarter of 2021. As I mentioned, applications can only be submitted electronically through the new online application system. So the website is included there. And then there is an email address for any of the questions on the program, community.connect@wdc.usda.gov. And then there's also a phone number there that one could call. Reconnect program. As I said, it began in fiscal year 18 with 600 million available. 2019, there was 550 million. And then 2020, we got some CARES funding and had $655 million available in this program. The program continues to evolve, being a brand new program. It was a pilot when it was rolled out in 2018. So you're gonna, see changes from round to round. The changes for round 2, which was published at the end of 2019, for 100% grants, 90% of the service area cannot have sufficient access to broadband. Pre-application expenses incurred for round 1, but benefit and application for round 2 could be funded up to 5% of the total award. And the public notice response period was increased from 30 to 45 days. So in round 1, it was quite popular with 146 applications processed nationwide, 79 approved in 33 states. Illinois was one. And then for round 2, we have had the announcement for round 2 applications for the majority of the states, and Illinois was successful in round 2 as well. So just kind of to see the different types within Reconnect, we do have a loan, we have a loan grant combo, and we have a grant only. So build out speed is 25.3 for all. The terms of the loan, the max award is $50 million at a 2% interest rate. Max award for grant is $50 million, or the combo is $50 million, which would be 50-50 loan grant. And then the max award for 25 million for the grant itself. That does require a 25% match on the grant piece. The loan is an open, non-competitive application process. The combo and the grant only are both competitive, obviously having that grant in there. The application deadlines are listed. Really, seeing application deadlines from the past doesn't mean much for the future because they're all over the board as far as when they were. So we don't know when to expect the next round of applications to be. This just kind of breaks down what type of applications we received in round 2. 7 loan applications from 7 states, 42 combo applications from 25 states, and 123 grant applications from 41 states. So not surprising that the grant is the most popular, but there can be some real benefits to the other style of programs, especially with the 2% interest rate on the loan. The CARES Act did provide $100 million in additional funding to the program. And then USDA received 11 round one applications that are eligible for that 100 million. Switching gears to our distance learning and telemedicine grant program. This is also a very popular program, very broad use from both the education and the healthcare sector on this. But distance learning, obviously meaning the real-time interactive delivery of curriculum via telecommunications, and promotes the connection of students and teachers at remote sites. Provide educational programs, instruction, or information originating in one area, whether rural or not, to students and teachers who are located in rural areas, or connecting teachers and students located in one rural area with teachers and students located in a different rural area. This program has actually been around for a really long time, but never has it been so popular and important than the last almost year. This is just crucial for everyone as we do the distance learning situations across the state. Telemedicine being the real-time interactive telecommunications, linking an end user from medical professionals at separate sites in order to exchange healthcare information for the purpose of providing improved healthcare services to residents of rural areas. The benefits must benefit rural residents both in reduced travel and improved access to service. So this program has been well funded in the past several years. As you can see, 37.9 million in fiscal year 19, and then we had an additional 26.2 million available that year to help rural areas with the opioid epidemic. And then in 2020, we had the 71.7 million available. And then some of those kind of set aside fundings was for the opioid epidemic, substance use disorder, and then all eligible DLT projects. And then there was a second window with CARES Act funding of 24.25 million, and then any carryover from the first window. The program does have a 15% matching requirement. The minimum grant amount is 50,000 and the maximum is $1 million. Illinois always receives the DLT. We have successful applicants each year. I can't think of a time that we haven't. We do always have several applicants, but if I'm ever asked, is it worth me applying because it's a very popular program, I say, you know, we always have success in this program. And if you don't get it one year, you can always try the next. In fiscal year 20, we received 276 applications for 155.9 million. And then for the second FOA, we received 534 applications for 252 million. So a lot of people are trying to take advantage of this program. So in Illinois, our US has approved over $261 million in projects serving Illinois residents through the programs that I just discussed, the telecommunications infrastructure being our largest program at 153.7 million. Reconnect, we've really done well in just 2 fiscal years at 87 million. The DLT program at 8.4, Community Connect at 2.1, and then that Broadband Initiatives program at 9.9. All of this is really, much of this, as Chris has worked in Illinois for several years, thanks to the work that he does with the applicants. So I'm just thrilled that he can be on the call today if there are any questions for him. And I've included my email address and phone number, and then Chris Collins, his email and his phone number.
Thank you, Molly. I want to encourage folks to take a moment. If you have a question for Molly or Chris, we are having just a very short Q&A intermission here right now. And just, you know, for now, Molly, I don't see any questions coming across, but we can give, you know, a little bit of time and see if we can have a few questions that may pop up in the chat. And here's one right now. Do you expect USDA and FCC USAC federal support to require provider certification as an ETC Section 214 eligible telecommunications carrier to the most this year's round of 3.2 billion and in future programs. And if that sounds a little bit confusing, Molly or Chris, you can read that question in the chat box as well. I realize I was sort of just relaying that to you. So feel free to take a look and provide some direction.
Chris, I will defer to you if you want to provide your answer.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, so I'll speak to USDA side. So USDA doesn't require, under any of our programs, doesn't require applicants to gain the eligible telecommunications carrier certification from the Public Service Commission. That's an FCC requirement. So I can't speak to what FCC may require in the future, but all USDA programs do not have the ETC requirement.
Thank you. Right now, I don't see any other questions in the chat box. Molly or Chris, do you have any sort of frequent question that comes up about sort of some of the content you've covered today that you think folks should know about before we move on to Matt's portion of the presentation?
I think one of our most frequent questions is, and especially fitting with Matt going next, is can our programs be used with the state's program? And I'm going to turn it to Chris for the answer, but that is a question that comes up quite often.
Okay, thanks, Molly. So in regards to a question like that, the only programs that require a matching portion where applicants may look at other programs is the Community Connect and the Reconnect program. It's not that we do not, I mean, we don't have a any regulation that says that an applicant cannot use other federal other sources to provide for match or components of the project. The biggest stipulation we have is none of our programs which require matching funds can be matched with other federal funds. And normally it relies or goes back to the funding source that they're looking at. So as long as the state program doesn't have any restrictions on the use of those funds towards leveraging for other with other project funds from other sources, there's not an issue. The biggest complication though is and I'll tell everyone, is in timing, because with our applications, if you're applying for one of our programs, you have to demonstrate you have the availability of those matching funds or other funds proposed at the time of application. So if you don't, if you're totally relying on a state ran program, but you do not have that awarded at the time of the application, then that could potentially be disqualification on the review of your application because you're not supporting having that matching funds or other funds.
Thanks, Chris. I can't think of anything else, but now it looks like we do have another one. Nancy?
Yes, thank you. So Matt Johnson asks, has there been any word at USDA about future Reconnect funding rounds? Will the company match requirements largely remain the same?
Molly, unless you have any other thing, unless you have more information than I do. As of right now, I mean, they are going to have a third round. They're working on items. Right now, one of the things that will slow this process is the change in administration. So as the new administration changes over, I mean, I have been told that a lot of regulation or Federal Register type postings have been halted until the new administration staff has a time to review that before it goes forward. So I think that's going to be our biggest holdup. But I do think that that's going to resolve quickly, and do expect the round 3 of Reconnect to be sometime probably in the second quarter of 2021. Also, regarding that second part, don't see many changes to this. There is one right now. There is a discussion on the table of looking at moving the 10.1 requirement up to possibly 25.3 regarding eligibility, or for eligible broadband service. Again, that's being discussed. I don't know if they really will change that at this point, since we've still been over obligated or over subscribed with applications at the 10.1 service. So Molly, you may, if you have something to add to that.
Nope, you covered it there.
And we do have another question that came through. Does Illinois encourage all programs in each of the 112 community college and county extension districts to work together as a community life and tech hub, including preparing for implementation of broadband map data validation assemblies to meet the semi-annual 477 applications, including hosting by utility co-ops and FCC USDA coordination? We have great participants that have really great questions.
Yeah, that's a great question,
Yes.
Nancy. Not one that I can answer. And I doubt that Chris can, but I will defer to him.
Yeah, and I do, and
Yeah.
thank you, Chris. You can definitely sound in. I think it's also a way of planting a seed. So you can answer the question, but you can also maybe provide your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I can't talk to most of this, because it seems to be more of a state thing. I will say that when it comes to FCC and USDA programs, I'll just put that piece in there. If you participate in our programs, you will see that the USDA tries to not overlap other federal funding sources. For instance, with our Reconnect program, we do restrict any funding applications where FCC previously did the CAF2 auctions, as well as the current recent RDOF auctions. We restrict those applications to the winners of those auction pieces, and to reduce the competition from someone else getting other federal funds to build the same thing there. So, I mean, we do coordinate with that. For data analytics, we try to coordinate as much as possible with those items. One of the big difference there is USDA, we do boots on the ground validation when we have applications come to us. So we actually do try to look at the actual broadband service in the area and not just rely on data analytics provided.
Thank you. We had another question coming through that asks about the economic methodology used in determining the level of the match requirement.
Molly, unless you have more info, I couldn't tell you where that comes from. I really can't.
Perhaps there's an indicator or a piece of data that's regularly used.
It's a regulation that the administration sets. So we would have to push this up to the Secretary of USDA's office, because they're the ones that set those requirements on how we. Sometimes Congress does as well. So we actually just push those through when we get the regulation requirements.
And Molly, if you don't have anything else to add, do you, or if you don't, at this time, I don't see any other questions. Thank you all for, participating in the in our sort of mini Q&A here. I think it was really important to kind of take a pause before we get into Matt's portion of the presentation and see what questions people have. And of course, If you think of anything more that you'd like to ask of Molly and Chris, go ahead and put those questions in the chat box, and we'll open up just a very large comprehensive Q&A at the end of the session as well. And thanks again, Molly and Chris. If you have anything more you'd like to add, please do so at this time. Otherwise, I can hand it over to Matt.
All right. Well,
Thank
thanks
you.
again, Nancy. Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Molly. Really appreciate that perspective. And we didn't mean to play stump the USDA here today. Those are some very specific questions, and so we'll certainly follow up. But thank you. That was just really great to set the table here for what we hope is some meaningful collaboration here in the year ahead. It's one of my New Year's resolutions here with the Illinois Office of Broadband is to work as closely as we possibly can to our colleagues at USDA, FCC, other federal funding and programming opportunities to add value and complement the work that we're doing here in Illinois. And I think we say a lot of times it's going to take an all hands on deck approach to solve our broadband challenges. That means state, federal, local, the private sector contribution. We want to optimize those investments in the collaboration wherever we can. And so again, thank you, Molly and Chris, for your time today. And you're welcome to stick around for the full Q&A at the end. Otherwise, we'll let you go if you've got other things. But as we usually do with these sorts of webinars, we like to kind of start out referencing our Connect Illinois website, just so folks who are joining us for the first time haven't had a chance to check out the website. This is where we keep a lot of our information, our programming. We try to, create a one-stop shop sort of atmosphere so folks can get answers to questions here. And certainly if the answer to your question is not here, we're always available at our email address, broadband@illinois.gov. But for today's conversation, I just wanted to flag a couple of things here in front of us. One, on this vertical right-hand menu here, the federal broadband tab. We're going to try to keep that as current as we possibly can in the year ahead with federal funding and programming opportunities, including the slides that we're going over today. And we'll update those as we get more information. We want to serve as strong a resource as possible to directing stakeholders and providers and others in Illinois, whether you're a community or a community member, you're interested in taking advantage of federal opportunities. We'll try to do what we can to make those connections. And so this federal broadband tab here on our website is going to be one resource for that. And then as you scroll down, and this kind of adds a little bit of detail to one of the questions that was asked of Chris and Molly regarding how state and federal funding programs can pair together. And thank you for your clarification on that point, Chris. Regarding the state's perspective, we've created what we're calling the Celebrator Framework. You either love it or you hate it, but the name is trying to imply that we want to partner with federal funding opportunities, accelerate the deployment of resources, and I guess optimize the impact. And so if you click on that Celebrator Framework tab, it'll take you into a kind of an overarching guidance that we're providing for how we would like Illinois resources, our Connect Illinois grant program in particular, to pair with federal funding resources. And so I'm not going to run through all of this, but again, this is a kind of a blueprint for how we see that kind of partnership working from our standpoint here at Connect Illinois. And so again, that's available on our Connect Illinois website. And so that kind of brings us into what we'd like to try to accomplish today. And I don't have an agenda slide here for us, but what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the CARES Act funding that was made available to Illinois and other states over the course of the last year. Just a quick overview, just for folks who are not familiar with the terms and what's been done. A lot of what may be done in the future may build upon that effort. So we would just want to kind of start with that basic framework. Then we can talk a little bit about the Consolidated Appropriations Act that was signed into law at the end of December. Certainly some ramifications and opportunities for Illinois. And then a quick preview of what the year ahead may hold in terms of future broadband investment. And so the idea here is not to get into the details. Many of those details are just not available to us right now, but rather we want to indicate that the Office of Broadband is very interested in partnering with the federal government on these opportunities. Again, that all hands on deck approach is going to be really important for us to meet our goals. And we want to be as strong a resource as we possibly can for providers and communities and the general public in Illinois to understand those opportunities and take full advantage of them. And so when we turn back the clock, almost a year now, we had CARES Act funding that came through the federal government. One large component of that was the education piece. And although the Office of Broadband does not have a direct interplay with the administration of those funds at the state level, we have a strong stake in the outcome and in aligning that effort with our programming. And so there's a couple of different buckets here the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, otherwise known as ESSER, had $570 million for Illinois based upon formula funding. The Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, also known as GEAR funding, $108 million for Illinois. The Education Stabilization Fund, those are discretionary grants that were provided on a competitive basis to states. And likewise, the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, which again was formula driven. So those 4 buckets were created through the CARES Act to fund education related programming and in recovery, and just trying to make our state and school districts and communities whole on the education front in battling the pandemic. On the telehealth front, we had $200 million for the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, for at-home telehealth programs for hospitals and healthcare providers. And so those dollars were made available to the hospitals and to healthcare providers. Very popular program. There was also additional funding for the Department of Health and Human Services, Public Health and Social Services Emergency Fund, as well as some money for the VA, the Veterans Affairs. And so just wanted to make mention of those opportunities because we're seeing some of that in the Consolidated Appropriations Act, the details of which are forthcoming. On the infrastructure front, again, Chris and Molly, you can keep me honest here. And so these are dollars devoted to the USDA's Rural Utilities Service for the Reconnect Grant Program, initial $100 million in additional funding, and then $25 million for that distance learning and telemedicine grant program. We just spent some time talking about that. An additional $50 million for libraries. From the Office of Broadband's perspective, we really think the libraries are like our schools, really on the front edge in terms of providing broadband service and resourcing in digital equity to our populations around the state. So making sure that those partnerships are strong, the funding is there. That was recognized in CARES Act funding a year ago. Now, so that's a little background. Just several weeks back, at the end of December, the Consolidated Appropriations Act was signed into law, and that was a $2.3 trillion overall investment, quite a bit larger actually than the CARES Act funding, with $7 billion to improve connectivity throughout the states. And so one provision in this, for those who do not know this, it did include some extensions for CARES Act spending by a year. And so as folks were scrambling at the end of 2020, if timelines have been adjusted and you're wondering why, it's because of language that was included in the Consolidated Appropriations Act. And so the slides that follow, we'd like to just provide, again, a higher level overview, identify the opportunities that are out there. We don't have a lot of detail at this moment on a lot of these programs. But the point here is we want to take full advantage of them, create meaningful partnerships, and make sure that folks in Illinois are well aware of these opportunities. And so there was a question regarding the emergency broadband benefit program that the FCC is administrating. And so there was a question specifically regarding ETC certification or verification. And my understanding is that that is not required. And so if there are any follow-up questions regarding that, we can certainly talk about that. But this program, the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, in Illinois, we have high hopes that this is going to help address a critical element of the digital divide. And that's where broadband service is available, but not affordable. What sorts of partnerships and remedies can be identified to getting populations to subscribe to service and get online and have that access. And so it really builds on some of the momentum created in Illinois regarding better understanding affordability and in affordability related barriers to broadband access. And so we're looking forward to partnering with our broadband provider community in Illinois to spread the word among Illinoisans and communities around the state that this is a great pilot program opportunity for us to lean into and to take full advantage of. Again, it's operating on a pilot basis. $3.2 billion may seem like a lot of funding, but when you're looking at the needs in this area around the country, this funding is not going to last particularly long. And so we want to take full advantage of this, demonstrate that this is a good thing for state federal, private providers, other organizations to collaborate on and sustain in the months and years ahead. And so more information will be coming on this. In fact, the Office of Broadband will be providing a public comment to the FCC regarding this opportunity. I think that public comment is due on Monday the 21st. I'm sorry, Monday the 25th of January. In any event, there's going to be a lot of conversation, we think, in the months and years ahead regarding getting the most out of this kind of collaboration. And so just want to mention that right out of the gates here. Another program that we think has a lot of opportunity is the Connecting Minority Communities pilot program. As you look at the impacts of the coronavirus and what we've all endured over the last year, inequitable impact on communities of color around the country, and that certainly is true in Illinois. And so I have high hopes that this pilot program is going to help us, in partnership with NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration within the U.S. Department of Commerce, to partner on targeting resources to addressing this disparate impact. And again, addressing that digital divide. And so I really hope that we're able to identify, as you can see in this third bullet, some minority serving education institutions, including partnerships with minority owned businesses in Illinois here, so that we can partner to seize some of these dollars through NTIA. I have high hopes that this is going to be the opening of something really impactful for our communities of color, and again, addressing the digital divide and the inequitable impact of COVID-19 throughout the state. So that's one opportunity there. Now, getting into the broadband infrastructure development grants that the NTIA is administering here. Details for this program, as with the others I just mentioned, are not out yet, but we expect the notice of funding opportunities to be posted for us to be able to get into the details in the coming weeks. But this is a great opportunity for the state and for private broadband providers to work together to collaborate for federal funding. We're not clear on how many dollars will be available to each state if we can put forward really bold ideas and get above what otherwise might be a $6 million or $7 million state average. We're hoping that we're able to identify a really compelling project or projects here in the state of Illinois. And so again, for the providers who are out there or others who have ideas on how to seize this opportunity, we really welcome some feedback and opportunity to partner. And then again, Chris and Molly did a great job with the Community Connect grants, the USDA $35 million. I'm not going to say anything more about that, but we think it's a great opportunity, and we really hope folks who are interested in that kind of work take advantage of it. Then we also have the Education Stabilization Fund administered through the U.S. Department of Education. And again, this is focused on elementary and secondary schools, as well as higher education institutions. It's a new appropriation that builds off of that GEARS funding, that Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, that bucket that we had mentioned several slides back. And the hope here is that, again, we are able to capture our share of dollars here in Illinois and use those to optimal impact. And again, building off of what was shared previously with the distance learning and telemedicine grant program, additional opportunities here. The piece that I think is worth clarifying is this program was oversubscribed, the telemedicine grant program in round one through CARES Act funding. And so I think that the starting point here is to take a look at those compelling applications that were not funded and find a way to fund those with additional resources. But I for one find distance learning, telemedicine to be two of the really compelling uses or applications of broadband connectivity, and I hope that we'll find some additional opportunity, whether it's through the state of Illinois or through federal funding, to make some of those uses in distance learning or telemedicine a reality across the state. Because I think now is really the time to be piloting new approaches, to identifying best practices, and to scaling up the sorts of things that can work across the state. And then we have the COVID-19 Telehealth Program, FCC. Sorry, I think I may have got ahead of myself here. This is the program that was oversubscribed, but nonetheless, incredibly important. And we want to see this sort of work not only continue through current funding, but find a sustained path forward for more and better examples of how to use federal funding, state partnership, and whether it's healthcare provider or broadband provider innovation. To do some really meaningful work in this realm. All right, so if you like acronyms, this is the slide for you. All right, on the access front, we have the Advancing Critical Connectivity Expands Service, Small Business Resources, Opportunities, Access, and Data based on access, need, and demand. Access broadband. I have to tell you, I have a past life in transportation where acronyms were the currency. This has outdone them all. And so, in any event, I think it speaks to something that I think has great value, and I welcome this. And this is not only the spirit of interagency collaboration at the federal level, but actually an office of internet connectivity and growth at NTIA to work with communities and others to integrate resources. And I think there's a tremendous upside to this sort of work, not to mention a flashy and impressive acronym. But more details will be forthcoming on this kind of work and the kind of interagency and perhaps cross-governmental collaboration that future funding in broadband might inspire. And so that brings us here, I think, to where we are today. Just last night, in fact, some details were released regarding the Biden administration's American Rescue Plan. It present $1.9 trillion included in the proposal. Many of the details are to be announced and determined, but we do expect there to be an infrastructure component to this investment, whether it's strictly tied to the rescue plan or coming on the heels thereof. What was announced, though, in the proposal, so this is not quite reality. It has not passed through the Congress and signed into law, but $170 billion to K-12 schools, colleges, and universities. The balance, hopefully, at the point we get to reopening and operating safely in school instruction, but also facilitating ongoing remote learning opportunities. And so this is, I guess, breaking news, if you will. It's hot off the presses. We hope to get more information regarding what's being proposed in the American Rescue Plan, as well as future infrastructure funding. We hope that there will be an infrastructure week here in the year 2021, and that in addition to funding traditional transportation and infrastructure robustly, that there's also some historic investments in broadband infrastructure as well. And so, again, just to summarize, we did a quick overview of CARES Act funding to familiarize folks who were not aware of the sorts of investments that were made roughly a year ago. Also, funding that was included in the Consolidated Appropriations Act, details of which are still forthcoming, and we'll do our best to share those with you, whether it's through our Connect Illinois website or through another webinar such as this. And then certainly a preview here of what may come in future federal legislation that could impact broadband. And so with that, I think we have a little bit of time on the back end here for questions of any of us.
Thank you, Matt. I have a question that was posted in the very early portion of the presentation that was, I believe this is in regards to the Connected Communities January 25th deadline.
Oh, sure.
Just a question on if there will be a round 3, and you can mention something about that, and then there's another sort of 4-part question coming up after that I will actually try to break up and feed to you in portions.
Sure. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I tried not to emphasize our Connect Illinois grant programming here today, but just, I guess, in review, there are some upcoming deadlines that are really important for folks. We have a whole slate of webinars in our extension Office of Broadband webinar library that's out there. But we have a deadline coming up on the 25th, so just around the corner here, for round 2 of the Connected Communities program. And so I would encourage folks that are in a position, if you're interested in this program, to get your application submitted. We hope to have a round 3, but we're cobbling together funding for operating in digital equity programming. And so I don't want to create the false sense that a round 3 is coming at any date certain point in the near future. We certainly hope to do that. That's our intention. But if you're close to submitting for round 2, I'd encourage you to get that application to us at any point on Monday the 25th.
Thanks. So first portion of this next question here. On Consolidated Appropriations Act, FCC USDA Coordination and Broadband Data Act integration, what's the status of using census tract pond and community garden areas and elementary school areas as subsets of soil and conservation areas, which are often county-wide? What's the status of using all of those in inclusion to the broadband map data on accessibility, affordability, and use,
Sure.
and integration into those dashboards?
I'll just say quickly, and forgive me if I'm missing, the thrust of the question here, but, we look at the broadband access mapping that's available on our website as the start of a conversation, and we don't look to any map as being the final word on where broadband is or is not. And so for our Connect to Illinois broadband grant program, we do have opportunities for office hours with applicants that are interested to talk through data or particulars of their potential application. That's one avenue for exploring some of these other data sets. Otherwise, I would just encourage applicants to make your argument in your application. Acknowledge that the mapping might say something that you don't believe, and put forward a strong argument. And we have a separate mapping review process by which we look at those sorts of challenges through a set process to determine which areas have broadband, which do not. And so certainly give us as much data as you can.
That's great. And I think this is also a little bit of a seed and really interesting idea. The second portion of the question is similar, where we have these mapping features already in place via these other campaigns, such as the tracing, the COVID tracing, or other GIS parties within educational institutions. And so the participant here is inquiring about that, and maybe if you wanted to comment on if you've thought of that, or if you know any of any of those prospects.
I'm going to have to punt on this right now. I don't have a good answer for that, and I think I would welcome the opportunity to have a conversation about that. I think we're really interested in data. We're really interested in bringing as many different kind of data points or inputs to making decisions and targeting resources, and that certainly could be something we consider moving forward.
Sure. And I just want to let participants know, we will always try to include all types of questions that you put in the chat box to try to engage, with you as best as we can, and provide you information about these different funding opportunities. I don't see any other questions. However, I don't want to necessarily conclude the program yet. So if anybody has any last minute questions, please put those in the chat box. Otherwise, what I'll do right now is put the broadband@illinois.gov email also in the chat box if folks think of questions that they might have right after the webinar. Maybe you didn't get a chance. So there's that. And Matt, if you can think of anything that you think, a frequent question or something in the back of your mind that you feel like folks should know, or if you have a takeaway for folks,
Yeah,
feel free.
absolutely. Yeah, I know that questions tend to trickle in here in the closing minutes, so I certainly want to give folks a chance to get those to us. In the meantime, I guess I would just emphasize that we have despite all the struggle with the pandemic and everything we've all been through over the last year, we have a really kind of unique opportunity, the broadband moment as it's been described, to look at the challenges we're facing and try to galvanize resources from the federal government, utilize our state investment, work with our private provider community, and also have these conversations locally. What kind of vision do we want for our communities, for our country, for our state on the broadband front? And how are we able to work smartly together to achieve those goals? And I think it would just be a shame if we didn't seize this opportunity in the year ahead to get smart with how we're collaborating over broadband and truly level the playing field where there are inequities, where that digital divide looms large, target resources smartly, and stand up programs that we're piloting this year that years from now we may look back and say, wow, what was life like without this kind of collaboration or this innovative work? And so I think that's the moment we're at right now. And so I would really encourage folks to have those conversations, with people in a position to partner with you. If you're at the community level, reach out to your providers, reach out to your community, talk about how to take advantage of these federal funding opportunities, what the state is doing with Connect Illinois and our digital equity programming. A lot of the energy and activity that's out there from an organizational standpoint or from a provider standpoint, I think there's a real opportunity in front of us for our communities to leverage broadband, the investments that we'll be making to the fullest. And so, Nancy, you give me a chance to talk about broadband with an open-ended question, man, I'll go on and on. But I mean, this is a challenge for us. It's a resolution, if you will, to do everything that we possibly can to close that digital divide. And for those of us who've been working in broadband for more than the last year, we've been waiting for a moment where I think the requisite, investment, attention, and policy making kind of converge. And I think we're at that moment. And I truly do hope that we're all able to move forward constructively and get the most out of it. And so I'll just say, the question is asked about our programming in Illinois. We have our Illinois Connected Communities program that is designed for community planning and capacity building at the local level. I know USDA has some great programming that's similar. Encourage folks to take a look at those opportunities for if you're not investing in broadband, building your skill set, your capacity, your know-how, your sophistication to be, I think, a stronger advocate for your community. I think that's a great thing for communities to be doing right now. And to the question about future funding for Illinois Connected Communities, I fully anticipate that we'll be able to keep this program going. We also have some work with broadband infrastructure investment with, of course, our Illinois Connected Communities, the historic $400 million investment in broadband infrastructure made by the Pritzker administration, the General Assembly back in 2019. We're hoping to get the most out of that historic investment. We have round 2 application window open right now through March 1st. And so if you're a community or a provider or a partnership, a co-op interested in learning more about that, there's certainly some webinar content out there, but also reach out to our broadband office, broadband@illinois.gov. We'd be happy to have a conversation about that. And then finally, I think as we get a better handle on the federal funding opportunities around digital equity, and certainly any resources that we're able to put towards this alone or in partnership with local philanthropy or others, we want to build out our digital equity offerings. And so that's something that we hope to have more and more information, in the coming, weeks and months on that front as well.
Thank you, Matt. I can't agree more, especially with what you had mentioned about the Illinois Connected Communities grant and sort of what that does for capacity building, just as having been a fly on the wall in a lot of those sessions. And Bill and I agreed that, putting those online is really important. All of the webinars, plus those sessions where, often it's communities sharing these ideas, similar to the comments that we saw in the chat. These different ideas and then people trying to build partnerships and work together. All of that was an interesting sort of platform for organic synergy and sort of listening to that and seeing how people were going, starting off on their journey. And it corresponds with even this question that came through in the chat box. A concern about how would a municipality that's just starting the process, how would they start to leverage this funding, which they feel maybe there's a baseline of capacity that's needed to even qualify for some of the funding. And so I'll let you maybe mention what your
just quickly a little bit more
be.
about our. And thanks for flagging that, Nancy. I just read that question too. And I think the whole point is here, we recognize that communities are at different points in the spectrum. Some are ready to go. They have a clear vision. They know what they want to do on the broadband access or adoption or utilization fronts. And so, our Connected Communities program, for instance, is designed to help them take that next step. But for a community that knows that it has to be savvier and doing more, but is kind of, at square one, that program or other similar programs are very helpful in that regard. Better understanding what is broadband adoption, what is broadband access, what is broadband utilization. How can you think about it holistically, but also tailor a vision to your community's needs and take those next steps. And so I'll just say there's some great content online through that webinar library that we referenced up front, Nancy. I think that's a great resource. We had a 4-part broadband leadership webinar series last May and June that I think would be a great starting point for a community. And then we'll do our best at the Office of Broadband, working with USDA and other partners to try in philanthropy and others to identify opportunities for additional programming or funding to help communities that want to partner and understand broadband opportunities better. So certainly, Carl out there, we saw your question and we encourage you to check that out. Also, I noticed that there's mention of our Illinois Broadband Connections newsletter that was made in the chat box. And yes, of course, folks, sign up for that. It comes out every other week, and we try to keep folks posted on what we've been up to and certainly point to opportunities for funding, partnerships, or programming.
Yeah, and I'll just add also that, you know, Matt had mentioned the Broadband Leadership Series. If you go to that page, and I'll put that in the chat box again, that starts with those it was the May 13 webinar. That's part 1, and I believe there's a heading there that says Broadband Leadership Series. So you might want to start there. We have another question as well. Is Connected Communities targeting 95% universal access and using hotspots and local family service agencies for annual campaigns within planning and service assemblies in community hub areas of 100,000 to 200,000?
Yeah, that very specific
Population.
question. Yeah, very specific question. You know, that sort of approach certainly could be included into what the connected communities do. We try to start at square one for communities that are just learning about access, adoption, and utilization. And so, you know, we have up to 50 hours of expert consultative, you know, time available to our individual communities. We also have kind of a best practice curriculum and an introduction to resources, both you know, in Illinois and nationally. And so I think for those who want to learn more information, of course, we got that webinar series. We've got the link on our Connect Illinois website. We have an application deadline coming up for round 2, and we're going to do everything we can to have a round 3 down the road. But again, a great opportunity for communities that are, you know, they're either at square one or they're ready to do something big and bold, but they want a little bit more support to do that. That's what that program's set out to do. Otherwise, I just want to give another shout out to USDA, Molly and Chris. Thank you so much for joining us today, and it's great to be able to collaborate on this end of things, and hopefully it's the beginning of more of that in the year ahead.
Definitely. Thank you for the invite, and I like your New Year's resolution, so we'll keep that going.
All right. It's not the only one, I'll tell you.
Hopefully it lasts longer than most.
Let's make that happen.
Right. Sounds great.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Matt, Molly, Chris. Thanks, everybody, for joining the session today. Look for that follow-up email with the recording and slides, and just hope everyone has a good rest of their day.
Thanks, Nancy.